Fernandina Beach, Florida. I'd just like to put in a little plug for my friends Mark and Donna Kaufman, who run this fabulous bookstore and who have kept it running almost entirely through the pandemic. It's been great to be able to be here and enjoy the cafe and to buy books and meet with like-minded readers. It's a thrill that they've kept it going, and we're so pleased and honored that it's here in Fernandina Beach. I'm really thrilled today to talk with a longtime friend of mine, S. Lee Manning, who's joining us from Vermont. Here we are doing virtual book release parties. S. Lee Manning has really done what we all want to do. As many of you know, I'm a lawyer. S. Lee Manning is a lawyer who quit practicing law to write the great American novel. And of course, we all say that we're going to do that, but she actually did it. So I'm going to be interviewing and speaking with S. Lee Manning from Vermont this afternoon. I'll be asking her some questions, and if you have questions, you can chat, enter your question on the chat Zoom, or you can join the show on Facebook and post your questions on the Facebook page, and then they'll come to me and I'll ask Sandy. So I call her Sandy, but it's S. Lee Manning, and she's written a wonderful new book called The Trojan Horse. It's an exciting, intriguing, political, romantic, and dramatic thriller. I want to start by introducing S. Lee Manning, who's with us here today from Vermont. Hello.
Hello, glad to be here.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about how you started out. As I recall, you came to New York City to go to college, and you were an English major. Let's go back to the beginning and tell us a little bit about that.
I went to New York after college. I went to be a writer. I got a job on some little magazines, and then I got very tired of being poor, and I decided to go to law school.
So it was really a financial decision that drove you away from your true love at first, writing.
It was financial. It was, I didn't want to wake up and be 50 and be still having to figure out how to buy a pair of shoes.
And your degree in undergraduate school was in English, correct?
English, yes.
And as those of us who did go to law school know, we're familiar with the fact that law school really sucks the creativity out of you. I'm assuming you didn't do any creative writing while you were in law school.
No, actually, I didn't do it for years for years after. It's an incredible time and energy, drain. And once the little time you have after work, you don't want to write.
Okay. And so at some point you decided to stop being a lawyer, and you were raising 2 young children and still living in Manhattan. But tell us what you did after you stopped being a lawyer. I know that you just wrote prolifically in every kind of genre there is and almost every platform there is to write in. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it's not completely accurate. I took a sabbatical for a while after my second child was born, when I didn't practice. We had moved to New Jersey by that point, and I took a couple of years off. Wrote a novel, which was terrible, and it'll never see the light of day. But everyone needs one first terrible novel. And then I went back to practicing law. I also was chair of something called New Jerseyans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, and I helped draft the legislation that ended the death penalty in New Jersey. And I spent a couple years as an English teacher in between there, and then kept going back and forth to law until really 2011, when I quit. I had a bilateral mastectomy for early stage breast cancer, and I decided I'd had enough. So I was going to be a writer from then on.
All right. So your first novel is The Trojan Horse, and I've read it. Now, I've known you about 40 years, and I had no idea you had such an interest in intrigue and Russian history and some of the more violent side of Russian history. Tell us how you got interested in that.
Well, I mean, I am the granddaughter of 4 Russian Jews. They all came here around the turn of the 20th century. And I've always been fascinated by Russia. You know, it's this really amazing contradiction. Very violent, very severe weather, totalitarian society, and yet it produces this wonderful literature, wonderful music, and the dichotomy always fascinated me. And so when I was trying to create a character, I like the idea of having someone who is Kolya. When you read the book, he is an extremely talented musician. He loves music. He's also a very capable of killing people. And he sort of contained, I thought, the two different the contradictory nature of Russia itself. I tried to learn Russian when I was younger. I can say a few phrases, but that's about it.
Well, you write beautifully about Russia and some of the Eastern European countries in this book where some of the hottest action in the book takes place. Have you visited those countries?
No, I did what actually Bram Stoker did, who wrote Dracula. I did it all from from guidebooks. Back the first draft of Trojan Horse, which was 850 pages back, that I wrote back in 2005, was 800. Was when the internet wasn't what it is now, and so I did it almost all from books research. I'd love to go to see Romania. It sounds like a beautiful country. I'd like to see Russia too, but probably not under the current government. But it was all hands-on research. I still have a pile of books on Romania, on Russia,
have you contacted a bookstore in Romania or a publisher in Romania so we can get the book published in Romanian?
I leave that to my publisher.
Okay, great. So tell the audience a little bit about your creative planning. This is always something that intrigues me about fiction writers. How do you get these ideas? How did you come up with this idea and this story?
Well, I think the basic idea of an American intelligence operative who is basically set up by his own agency to be betrayed in order to get information. That was the basic. I have no idea how that came to me. But that was the base idea. And then from there, I had to write. I did a rough outline. I always write my outlines. I have notebooks full of, I handwrite my outlines. And then I write a more detailed outline, and then I start writing the book, and I throw the outline out.
Well, I don't know if you've ever visited William Faulkner's home in Oxford, Mississippi, but the outlines for his books, he hand wrote on the walls of his guest room in pencil. So I suppose that you haven't been doing that there in Vermont.
No.
And I know there are some intriguing methods of torture in this book, and that was a surprise to me to read that you had written that. And what prompted your interest in this sort of medieval torture methods?
Well, I mean, it was more just, you know, if you had, what would someone be likely to do? And I actually bought a couple books on torture and what is done by totalitarian or governments. I'm to try and make it realistic, because if someone is kidnapped by someone who does commit torture, what would they do? And so that's where I got get most of my information, unfortunately, from things that have already been done to people.
Well, was your family surprised that you had this interest in instruments of torture? And
well, I've been considering that I wrote this book when my kids were really young, I don't know that they were surprised by it. You know, my daughter used to laugh at, you know, the problem that the honest truth is I can't watch violent television shows. My daughter used to laugh at me and say that if she made this into a television movie, I couldn't watch it because it's so violent.
And as we say that, your daughter is actually a screenwriter in Los
Yeah,
Angeles, correct?
a talented screenwriter.
You told us a little bit about how you keep notebooks and a hand draft and make an outline and then go to the writing. Tell us a little bit about your, and for me and many other writers, I know this is a problem. How do you make yourself do this writing? Do you set aside certain hours of the day? Do you have a special room, a special desk? What is it that can get you up to speed to sit down and actually produce these words?
Well, it's kind of complicated. This is my writing room right here. See all my books. This is my I write here. So I do have my own writing room. I'm not one of those there's some very disciplined writers who get, you know, they have, I'm going to do 1,000 words a day, and they do it and they get up and they do it. It's, I'm more obsessive. If I start, I will get into a groove, or I call it into the zone, and I will just do nothing but write. And when I'm not writing, I'm thinking about what I'm writing. And then sometimes I'll get distracted because I have ADD, and if I'm distracted, I have to, you know, I'll go do something else for a while. But then when I get back into it, and I can have a tendency, an ability to hyper focus, and that's all I do. So.
Do you bounce, as you're doing this writing, do you bounce ideas off of your family members?
Sometimes. At this point, pretty much, I just sort of, I sometimes will, you know, run something by, but I'm pretty much just doing it right now. For the new book, I'm just writing it, and then I'm going to make people read it and get their reaction.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about the new book in just a minute, but I wanted to ask you, I know you said you first wrote The Trojan Horse in 2005. How long did you actually work on it prior to having the finished product?
Well, as I said, the first draft was 850 pages. It took me a year.
An opus.
Yeah, it was. And then what I did was I forced a number of people, friends, to read it. And the comment I got was, wow, I got this page 300 and I couldn't put it down. And I said, well, I better do something about the first 300 pages then. So I cut it basically in half. And then I cut it down some more. And then I won New York Mystery Writers of America had a mentor program in 2006. And I won. If you submit the first 50 pages and you win, you get read by an agent. And so I won, and I got my first agent, and she sent it around. I got lots of really complimentary rejections from big publishing houses, basically saying we're not publishing spy thrillers right now. And then so I eventually put it on the shelf, and fast forward a number of years, and I thought I'd try it again. I took it out, re-edited, rewrote. I got a publishing contract with a book, 5-Star Publishing. And then they decided before they published that they were going to stop publishing in the mystery and thriller realm. So the book went back on the shelf. And then last summer, I thought, give it another try. I knew Circle, the publisher of Encircle, is a great guy who I know through having met him through 5-Star. And he was interested in Trojan Horse. And so I did another rewrite and re-edit, and here we are.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned all of the rejections that you had gotten. I noticed that Steve Barry wrote a blurb on your book. And of course, Steve Barry is what we consider a homeboy here in Northeast Florida, Southeast Georgia. He's another lawyer turned writer. And he used to appear at a lot of our book festivals, and he's been at Story and Song probably 20 times to do book readings. And he always tells a story about he had in his lawyer's office drawer, I think 74 rejected manuscripts just piled on top of one another. So it's good that you persevered. It must be exciting to have your first novel published. Yesterday was the release date, correct?
Yes, it was, and yes, it is.
And it's unfortunate. You had planned to go on a book tour before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and now you're going to be doing some virtual book tour, a virtual book tour.
Yeah, I had this great idea. I have a van, and I was going to paint the side of the car with my book cover, and then I was going to drive from city to city. And unfortunately, that's not happening this year. But I'm doing a few virtual book events, and and it's not quite the same, but it's still very exciting.
Let's go back to the book. I wanted to talk about, this book wraps around the intrigue of a spy agency, an American double secret spy agency. And you seem to have a great deal of knowledge about the inner workings of sort of the CIA or the NSA. And I'm wondering, did you ever work in one of those type of agencies?
Well, if I did, I wouldn't tell you, would I?
Good answer. That's perfect. And were you always fascinated with this sort of governmental spy intrigue?
I always loved the spy world, mainly probably in my early teenage years. There were a lot of spy shows and spy movies on when I was growing up, but I also loved the thing with spies is they're people who aren't quite who you think they are. And I was a very shy kid. I used to go to parties. As a teenager, I'd go to parties and then hide under tables because I was too shy to talk to anybody. But I'd sit there and watch people. And then I'd go home and write about them. And I thought, there's a lot of similarity between writers and spies. And then I also love the whole idea that there's a sort of world that exists that the average person doesn't know exists, that you think, you're meeting this person, and you think he's an accountant for the IRS, which is what his girlfriend's family thinks Kolya is, and he's actually a spy who carries around a gun, and it's.
Well, you mentioned Kolya being the main character, the protagonist in the book. You mentioned his girlfriend. There's some wonderful romance in this book. There's a nice thread all the way through of a great romantic tale. And I've known you for a long time. I consider you pretty much of a romantic. Do you see yourself that way?
I think I'm pretty romantic. I love a good love story. When the characters, especially when they're evenly matched and they can bounce off each other. It's still something I love to read.
Let's shift gears and have you read one of the romantic scenes from the book.
Okay. So I'm going to read the scene, and one of the things you have to know at this point in the book, the reader knows, but Kolya does not, that he thinks he's about to go off on an ordinary mission. And what the reader will know is that what he's actually about to walk into a trap. But so with that knowledge, you have to put the whole romantic scene in there. When the alarm rang, Kolya flipped the switch and glanced at Alex, who was still asleep. Resisting the urge to kiss her outstretched arm, he pushed himself out of bed and headed for the bathroom. He let the warm water on his face finish the job of waking him. They should have gone to sleep earlier, 5 hours was not enough. Toweling himself dry, he smelled toast and fresh brewed coffee. He pulled on his robe and padded barefooted into the kitchen. Alex, uncharacteristically, was cooking. What are you doing up? It's only 6. He stroked back a strand of hair that had fallen in her face and traced a finger down her cheek. You're up. I don't have a choice. I have to get to the office. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stirred in sugar. I need to go home and change my clothes, and I wanted to say goodbye. I said goodbye last night so you could sleep. He leaned against the counter, cradling his cup between his hands. It was so much fun. I thought I'd say it again. It won't quite be the same. He gave her a half smile over the rim of his coffee cup. It had been good. Dinner had been wonderful, and after dinner they had walked through the chill of an October night to a small jazz cafe. Afterwards they had returned to his apartment for a leisurely session of lovemaking. She whisked the eggs vigorously. I'll drop you at the office on my way home so you don't need to walk, and you can use a decent breakfast. Don't give me that look. I am perfectly capable of cooking scrambled eggs. If you say so. But just so you know, there's a fire extinguisher in the cabinet on top of the refrigerator. In the bedroom, he pulled on a blue polo shirt, a white sweater, and a pair of jeans. He settled his holster around his waist before retrieving his HK. After checking the manual safety on his semi-automatic, he placed it in his holster and pulled his sweater down to hide the gun. Returning to the kitchen, he accepted a plate of eggs and toast, which he carried to the table. Alex joined him a minute later. Thank you for cooking. He lifted a forkful of the eggs. Overcooked. He tried extra salt. It didn't help. He added pepper. You're welcome. I overcooked the eggs a little. He bit into the toast. And the toast, she added. I noticed. I'm perfectly happy to cook, and I'm better at it. It's 6 a.m. I made you coffee, and I made you breakfast. Are you going to eat, or are you going to kvetch? I wasn't kvetching, just observing. At least the coffee was good, strong, the way he liked it. He hesitated only for a moment. I thought, perhaps, you might want to join me in New York next weekend. While you're on assignment? It's a low-risk operation, not much different from working here. I can take a personal day on occasion. I thought perhaps we could do some jazz clubs and visit the Diamond District, if you're interested. Jazz clubs in the Diamond District. I'm intrigued by the combination. But she was smiling. Care to elaborate? He stirred sugar into his coffee. I should think it obvious. New York continues to have one of the best venues for jazz, and I want to buy you a diamond ring. She reached across the table. He took her hand and kissed it. You do actually have to say the words, Kolya. She knew they'd been building to this moment for the past year, longer as far as Kolya was concerned. Still, she wanted him to be explicit. He could do this much. After all, he was committing to a lifetime with her. I'm asking you to marry me, Alex. So this is the talk we were going to have about the future? But she was still smiling. Is there anything else that needs to be said? He thought of something else and then added it. Other than I love you.
Well, that's an exciting and wonderfully happy scene, but there are some darker scenes in this book. And I just have a question about the transition between the lovely and the exciting and the romantic and the uplifting, and then how do you just as a writer sort of jump into this dark side, into the sort of the terror that happens next?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like life, isn't it? I mean, all of life it's yin and yang. There's everything, there's a beautiful is balanced by the possibility that something bad could happen. And I think the contrast makes each scene more poignant. The fact that there's this love story and these two people who were hoping to get married and have a life together makes the violence more terrible, and the fact that that something terrible could happen makes the love scene more poignant.
Well, take us to a passage in the book where there are some dangerous activities going on. Let's hear about those.
Okay, so I'm going to a quick explanation because I don't want to. There's a lot of this is too long. So I'm starting sort of in the middle. I'm reading it in the middle of a gunfight. Kolya and a friend of his who it wasn't supposed to be with him are in New York, and he has walked into a trap, and they've been ambushed, and people are shooting at him, and his friend has been wounded. So they're in the middle of a gunfight, and that's where I'm starting. He didn't feel pain from the bullet that hit the side of his right leg several inches above his knee, but he felt the impact. He fell heavily, and his leg slid under the Lexus. Hands shaking, he returned fire. Eric fired over him. The gunman fired again and ducked out of sight. Eric, all right? There was no response. Kolya could feel the silence. Eric, either unconscious or dead, was slumped against the side of the dumpster. His leg refused to move. He pulled himself into a sitting position and leaned against the cold metal. They could come at him from two sides, but his back was covered by the dumpster, his front by the now bullet-ridden Lexus. His upper right leg throbbed and blood spread across the dark fabric of his jeans. His short grace period was ending and the pain starting to build. He took deep breaths to stop his hands from shaking. This block was commercial, but there had to be apartments close by. It was Manhattan. There were apartments everywhere. It had only been a few moments at most since the encounter had started, but someone must have heard the shots. Help would come. He had ammunition and could hold them off. Unless, dizzy and nauseated from the pain and loss of blood, he passed out before help arrived. He put his head down to his knees. Footsteps approached from the far side of the dumpster. He straightened and steadied himself to shoot. The footsteps retreated. He touched the side of his jeans and his hand came away red. He stripped off a strip of his jacket lining and bound it tightly around his wounded upper leg. It wouldn't do much, although the pressure might slow the bleeding enough to keep him conscious until help arrived. And beyond a match, it hurt. Just how many men were out there? 2 men had shot from the left. 5 men had exited the van. He had shot 1. That left at least 6. He felt a breeze against his face. What had Eric said? Something about a lovely October evening in New York? Time was running out. He had to try something. Eric would die if help didn't arrive soon. He felt in his jacket pocket for his phone. It was an exercise of futility, but he tried anyway with the same result as before. The signal was still jammed. How long had it been? You're surrounded, Petrov. Your friend is injured. We only want you. Surrender and we'll leave him alive. He had considered surrendering, but only when Eric had been conscious and able to protect himself. Kuza's men would not want to finish off Eric badly enough to risk walking into a bullet. But Eric unconscious was another matter. He had no illusions about what would happen to his defenseless friend. This wasn't the fucking Boy Scouts. He also knew what would happen to him if he surrendered. Kuza didn't obey international laws prohibiting torture.
Oh, I'm all nervous and worried because I know what happens next. I can't wait for our viewers to read it. It's such a great, like it's been said, just can't put it down. But I understand you're working on a sequel.
Yes, I am.
And that's called Nerve Attack.
Yes.
And you already have a publication date?
September of 2021.
And as we said at the beginning, you promised that you're going to come to Story and Song in Fernandina Beach, and we're going to do a live release of that book, right?
I am going to have a qualification. We do have to have a vaccine, and things have to be. This pandemic has to be over.
Well, given that, yes, assuming that
yes, I am coming.
See you here.
There's a third book I haven't really started yet. That's supposed to be a year after that, but I need to finish this one first. And actually, there's a glimpse of what's coming in the next book in Trojan Horse, where there's a couple times where Kolya talks about or thinks about his best friend as a child. It's named Dmitri. and Dmitri plays a prominent role in the next book.
Right. Let me check with our technical staff here and see if we have any questions for you.
Okay.
Want me to read it?
No, actually,
Okay.
I got it.
Okay.
If we just have one question right now.
Okay.
If you weren't writing about spies, what else would you want to write about? What would another novel focus be for you if you couldn't write about spies?
Did you hear that?
If I couldn't write about spies, well, I mean, I have other ideas for books, but I actually want to write a book about my father's experience in World War II as a navigator. I got his records from the National Archives, and again, before the pandemic hit, I was planning to go drive down. He was stationed in Texas. I was planning to do a trip down there and investigate it and write both from a book, both from a point of view of a daughter investigating what happened to her father, and then try and do a historical back and forth of what it might have been like for him as so that's a project that I have on hold, but I'd like to do it eventually.
All right. Any other questions? You can put your questions on Facebook, or you can text them to me. Let's see if we have anybody else that wants to know. And Sandy, I'll just give you a few minutes to talk about, whatever you'd like to say about the book, and encourage people to read it. Just a couple minutes to wrap up here and talk a little bit about anything you'd like to say.
Well, I mean, I think, I'd like to make a pitch for reading it, and not just because, I think one of the problems we sometimes have is that books get sort of pigeonholed as whether they're literary books or genre books. I think that, I think it's a good book. It has ideas in it, as well as what I like the most about the book is there are some ideas that gives you something to think about when you walk away, not just having had a engrossing experience with a story and characters who you like, but some thoughts about, what's the nature, what sort of things should a American agency be doing. And also I bring up some of the issues about anti-Semitism in this book.
Quite a bit, right?
Quite a bit of it. And I haven't talked about that at all, but anti-Semitism became a more prominent feature of this book with the last rewrite, in great part because of what's been happening over the last few years with the rise of neo-Nazis and increase in anti-Semitic acts. My character Kolya is a non-religious Jew. He from Jewish immigrant from Russia. His name isn't Jewish because of one non-Jewish grandparent. But he experiences a lot of anti-Semitism in the course of the book. And it's something that I wanted to bring up because it has become another issue, a big issue right now, I think.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to also, and this is something that I'm hoping is come through a little, there's a question, Kolya is basically chosen to be sacrificed by his boss. And there's a point where, he's treated differently from his close friend. He has a close friend named Jonathan, who's rich and the son of a senator. And he's Irish Catholic descent. And so I never really go into why they choose, a question of choosing Kolya, except that he doesn't have a family. So that makes it a little more convenient if he's the one who's lost. But I want to subtly raise the question, was there any bias in choosing him as opposed to choosing someone else?
Well, it's a remarkable book and a really wonderful read. I want to ask you, I understand that since you're not able to be with us or at other bookstores to sign books, you have sent out some signed book plates. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that is and how that would work, and if people want individualized signed book plates, can
if you
we get those to you?
You have to get it. If I send some to the bookstore, if anyone wants just a signature, and you can, you know, it's just, they're over here. I have this, here's a little box. They look just like this, and you can just put them sort of wherever you want in the front of your book with a signature like that. And it has my signature. But you can also, if you want it personalized to you, or I'm pretty I can, if you contact me, I can
contact you through the bookstore, and
the
we can keep a list here at the bookstore.
Something personalized and send it off.
Okay. Right.
To anyone who buys a book, I'm happy to do that.
Wonderful. And just to remind our listeners that you can order books online from Story and Song here in Fernandina Beach. You know, as we like to say, let's keep our independent bookstores that care about our authors really going. So if you'd like to order a copy of Trojan Horse from Story and Song, I encourage you to go to their website and do that. Unless we have any other questions. No, Connor says no. All right, so Sandy, in honor of your publication of your first book, I have a little award to give you, and I had it delivered to your house last night, and you should have it there wrapped in some paper.
I have it here.
All right, so you can go ahead and open it, and as you're opening it, on the occasion of your first novel, have you opened it? I give you the...
I'm getting there. It's got these ties.
Oh yeah, twist ties. I didn't have any ribbons, sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
All right.
I like the paper.
It's the Golden Paperclip Award for the best creative use of an office implement in any book ever.
For those who, a paperclip plays a very important part in this book.
Yes, readers, listeners should know that the paperclip is a very important character in Trojan Horse. So I hope with that you've enjoyed meeting S. Lee Manning, and we'll order her new book, Trojan Horse, from Story and Song. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. And thank you, Connor, for all the IT help.